Hello, Automating Success listeners and followers. This is your host, Joe Langton. Today I have Ross Blum on the show. He is the president and chief operating officer at Skyline Robotics. He's been an entrepreneur and startup nut like myself throughout his career, always looking for a new way to innovate archaic industries. After finishing law school and being admitted to the bar in New York, Ross didn't want to bill hours in a cubicle. So he began, I might be saying this wrong, but Ping MD. I'm assuming, I don't know if it's a typo I put in there, but it was a secure communications and telehealth platform. He also created one of the largest digitally licensed content setups with Marvel, Disney, NBA, and Hasbro. He has joined Skyline Robotics to bring his startup acumen to the forefront of that company and lead its expansions abroad. Basically, Ross looks like one heck of a startup guy, one heck of a businessman. So I want to kind of just get into it and make sure I didn't miss anything, Ross. Go ahead and introduce yourself and tell my guests if I did a decent job with the research for you.
You did a great job, Joe. And first and foremost, thank you for having me on the show. Always a pleasure to connect with new audiences, and you guys have built a great platform here at Automating Success, and just really excited to be here with you. I'd say maybe I'll add one or two things from the intro that you provided. So born and raised here in New York City. So, been around skyscrapers my whole life. So here at Skyline Robotics, really feels like I'm, doing the right thing and trying to help maintain, these really tall, large, and big assets, that we have sticking out of the ground here in Manhattan. And you did, sort of get it right. I didn't found Ping MD, but I did lead the sale of that company. Spent 4 years doing digital assets. So before the term non-fungible token or NFT exists, at Quid, we were playing around with this notion of digital ownership, very much in a centralized platform at first. So, definitely mobile applications, iOS, Android, things of that nature. The company now has been sold to Animoca Brands and now is starting to do much more sort of blockchain activity there. But I've been in Skyline for about 2.5 years now. It's been an awesome 2.5 years. One thing that I'll say about, sort of my journey from health tech to digital assets, now robotics, I've gotten to learn a lot, about very different industries. And to exactly what you said, my mindset's always bringing innovation to age-old industries, trying to find a better way to do it. And, really trying to lead the charge and make sure that we're on the right track. And the vectors are looking good.
And so, I think you and I, we share the equal passions because, at the end of the day, entrepreneurs, we're trying to solve problems, right? We're just, at the end of the day, the best entrepreneurs are the best problem solvers, And, so what exactly is the problem Skyline is solving, for the listeners so they understand?
Yeah, 100%. And just for the listeners, just some maybe brief context. So when you see people cleaning your windows, they're usually standing in these elevated scaffolds or baskets that they're called. Just rather than putting human beings in those baskets, we're actually placing robotic arms in those baskets, and allowing the robots to actually do the cleaning. So, I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about the technology and what we do, on that side. But in terms of like problem solving, what are we trying to solve? So, one of the least sexy things to be able to talk about is simply a labor shortage. So the statistics in the US are that 76% of window cleaners are above the age of 40, and only 9% are between the ages of 20 and 30. When you pair that with the rate of new development, so new construction, new buildings that have been built, not just here in the US, but really on a global scale as well, the last 15 years have seen a tremendous growth of new construction projects, new buildings that have been, minted and are now in operation. So the sort of paradigm that exists within the industry is that we have an aging workforce with very few people signing up and only more and more windows to clean. So, everywhere that we look around here in Manhattan, and if you go to other, cities around the US and certainly internationally as well, there's a lot of construction happening. So there's not going to be any slowdown in new windows to clean. And so systemically, either there's two options that can happen. One, the service providers can pay much higher wages and pass those costs on to their end customers, or there could be a better way, to actually perform the operations. And so at Skyline, we obviously believe that we're that better way, and excited for what's happening. There's a few other layers to this though, Joe. So labor shortage, being able to maintain the building, certainly top of mind for everyone. But there's like operational efficiency gains, and a really big piece of the puzzle is also transparency. Building managers, property managers, they don't have time to go outside and check out what's happening on the facade every day. They're not getting insights or analytics or data about really how much work is being performed. They know that work is happening, right? They get an email that the service provider is sort of signed into the building, for the day. So they know someone like showed up, but they don't know what happens in between showing up and leaving in the building. And so being digital, bringing robotics to the forefront, we're trying to bring a lot of transparency also to an industry that really hasn't had much, since its inception, about 100 or so years ago. The final piece of the puzzle is always safety. By removing the human element on the side of the buildings, we're reducing risk. That risk should be calculated, through a few different lenses, but at some point it will lead to insurance cost reductions, both for service providers, the asset owners, or the building owners themselves as well. And so, if we can do things more efficiently with safer parameters, supplement an aging workforce, and bring transparency, data, and analytics to an industry that has never really had any, we feel that this is turning into a really, really special opportunity with what we're working on.
Yes, you gave me a whole lot to unravel there, but
let's go, Joe.
I basically have to check off about 25 questions now. So great job. Now you just made my job. So here's the thing. So first thing, as you said it, you said, let's talk about labor analytics, not sexy. Well, in our industry, that is sexy, because, every person that wants to oppose what guys like you and I are doing, or teams like our teams are doing, I should say, are all people saying, but you're taking jobs. And I just had this discussion. I was at a graduation party this week, and all these young people and all their parents are there, and they know stuff I'm doing. And they're like, oh, but you're taking jobs. And I go, hey, well, do you want a job cutting grass? No, neither does anybody else. I can tell you, I want to be a billionaire one day, but if somebody told me, hey, here's a suitcase of $1 billion, go get on one of those freaking window elevators and wash windows, I'd actually say, yeah, I'll take $1 million. I'll do something different, right? So
yeah, and exactly on that point, Joe. I've been out in the field with teams that do go out over the side of the buildings and are hanging from these scaffoldings, essentially. Those guys are my heroes. I say that to them. Like, what they do is like beyond any level of my willingness to be like scared, like by far and away. I mean, they're 1,000+ feet in the air doing manual labor. It can be 40 degrees outside. It can be 120 degrees outside. I mean, once you start getting into the summer months, it's not just the direct sunlight that hits you, but also you're getting hit with the reflection of the sunlight as well. It is tough to be out there. So I totally understand and respect, everything that goes into, being willing to do that job. But on the other side, I can also understand why it's not as appealing, of a profession as maybe it once was. I mean, historically, it was a generational job. Like, my grandfather was a window cleaner, my father was a window cleaner, and I became a window cleaner. If you go back to like the 30s and 40s, especially once the Empire State Building, was up and built, at that time, it really had like a really deep, rich tradition, sort of that like generational sort of like lineage, within the industry. But I would tell you that Skyline Robotics is really exciting, but Skyline Robotics and every other startup out there is also the problem with this. And what I mean by that, Joe, is that the educational and vocational diversity that exists in our world today is so different than 40 years ago, 30 years ago, 20 years ago, even 10 years ago. You can go to college and get degrees, or go to different sort of like trade schools or master's programs, and really be able to learn about such different things than, again, going back 4 decades, 5 decades, things of that nature. But on the flip side, if you don't want to sort of pursue maybe that like traditional educational path, or what's perceived as the traditional educational path, at least, if you have a mission, if you have a belief about something on this planet, there is probably a startup that is pursuing that ambition at this point in time. It doesn't mean everyone's going to be successful, but you can like find something that is like pinpoint accuracy about like, what am I most passionate about, and what can I go to do to, get a job specifically in this very, very niche sort of like industry that I and, 100,000 people on the planet might be interested in, right? There's probably a startup pursuing so many different lenses. And look, not saying that all startups are able to pay the biggest dollars, right? But it can be first jobs, second jobs. You show you're hungry, you want to get in somewhere, and that passion for that particular subject allows you to be a difference maker, in a small scale company, certainly at an early stage. So I would tell you, I love startups. As you sort of introduced me, like, I feel like I'm a startup rat. Like, I love having my back against the wall. I love having the odds against me. And that's sort of like a mentality that, got to ingrain into the team, like with me. Like we might be the market leaders today. And I think that's like a pretty clear cut statement, but it's so early still. The target's on our back. People are going to come try to hunt us down, right? We got to use all these different layers to find the right screw to turn at the right time for that right moment to get that extra little like 1%, 2%, out of everything that we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah. So, man, we have so much in common. I feel like we're going to be best friends off the show. I got to come to New York apparently because there was a thing. I mean, you brought up the bullseye. We've been a market leader in this since I got started in 2016 in what I do. And, but the reality is, you're doing robotics, but you're still a service business using robotics. Okay. So, right. I mean, at the end of the day, you're providing service with your robot. So, that's what I always try to tell people. Like, yeah, people can start up, they can try to make something different, whatever. But if they don't have the last mile figured out, they're not going to catch up. And I believe for me, and you guys are probably already working on this. The people that have the last mile figured out are the people that stay ahead of the pack. And I know people, and I'm sure too. New people are going to come in, but so for instance, what do you think your industry is valued at? Like when it pops,
what's my industry?
Well, your industry sounds like washing windows, right? Right now, you're washing skyrise windows.
Yeah, so we do have a little bit bigger ambition for our products. So there's more than just window cleaning that happens on the facade. So
let's just stay on window cleaning right now, Ross. Hold on, let's just stay on that.
All right.
Okay.
All right. So we estimate, or I would say third-party estimations of the industry size. I've seen numbers anywhere from like 4 billion to like 85 billion. We picked a report, that showed a 40 billion number. We think like the sort of like addressable market for our product is probably closer to like 25% of that, because we're only really going after the skyscrapers. We think other people might have more innovative or interesting products for middle of the country office parks, candidly at the end of the day. But where the larger dollars are in the window cleaning industry, and generally in the building services industry, are at the skyscraper level. So being able to handle the buildings, in some cases that can be 100 stories, more than 100 stories. That's our ambition. That's our playground, and that's where we want to own 100%.
Yeah. Well, and so I brought that up is, so like, even for me, when I'm leading my team, I'm like, listen, we have the bullseye, but what is the percentage we think we can achieve as a team always in this market, right? And that's the part where I think a lot of, you said there's tons of startups, but, I think you have to identify that. You have to say, okay, listen, we're startup, we're changing the world, we're doing something to better the world we live in. Rising tides raise all ships, but what percentage is our focus to keep? So like I can tell you, for me, it's 6%. Like I say, in $100 billion opportunity, I want to keep 6% of it. That's a realistic goal that I can communicate to my team to keep them focused on moving forward. Now, you brought up the different things, and we'll get into that. I don't want to cut you off on that, but there's a couple of other things just for people listening, because like part of the reason I do the show is to make people want to accept the things like Ross and I are doing. And, I always try to tell people, like new people coming into the world, into the job world, so many old timers, and I'm going to say it as it is, they're like, yeah, you could have a hell of a career washing windows, but there's better things that exist now. In the 40s, there wasn't something better that existed, so you took what you had. That's number one. Number two, you said it was a generational thing. I'm assuming there's a little bit of like stone cold nerve endings that are not afraid of heights that have to run in the family, because I would freeze. If you put me on that platform the first time it swayed, I'd be calling a crane to boom me off the thing. I wouldn't want to even move, So, these are things we have to look at. Now human beings have just gotten smarter. I mean, in the 40s, OSHA probably didn't even exist yet. We were not taking claims and figuring out a workman's comp rate. I mean, actually, Ross, what's the multiplier on work comp for a window washer? Right? I mean, I can tell you in the professional landscape world. Well, I can hear it, to extrapolate.
Yeah, and it gets more fun with in New York we have what's called Labor Law 240, which is known as the scaffolding law. It is a strict liability law, and it applies to any type of scaffolding or elevated scaffolding. So most of the injuries happen in construction. But because that basket is an elevated scaffold, it also applies to the window cleaning industry. The premiums are crazy. I mean, you're talking seven figures just if you're like a new entrance to the market, like easy just to go up on the building, right? That's coming out of your pocket. It's wild, and there's getting fewer and fewer insurers that are willing to underwrite for the New York region as a result of that law.
Well, and so this is exactly the point that I always like to try to make people, because, and I don't know if it happens as much for you. I mean, I think you're already entering like a higher niche market. Like for me, I'm in the market of robotic lawn mowing. It's low barrier of entry. If you have a pickup truck and a lawnmower, you can call yourself a landscaper, right? But the reality is, it's not until you level up do you realize, okay, workman's comp is $16 $100. For every $100 I pay somebody, it's $16. The people that are always against the automation are never the people that have to figure out all those other things, figure out the seven figures just to be in the game. Okay. Figure out how you're going to go and start pricing work. And then even the stress it likely puts on these managers and business owners, knowing they have human beings on these lists. I mean, I don't know that even as an entrepreneur, if I would ever want the stress of knowing that my team members were 70 stories up washing windows. That's a lot of stress, even not only for the window washers to carry, but the business owners and the managers, right?
Yeah. And look, I'm not saying that it doesn't apply to other industries, but you briefly mentioned like OSHA. And so, our business model is essentially to partner with local window cleaning companies. Local, I don't mean small, in scale, but most window cleaning companies, they're not national. They're certainly not international. So you have a bunch of sort of like regional players that operate within sort of a subset of markets. And with that approach, I lost my train of thought. Maybe you can jog my memory.
So we were talking about OSHA. You're going after the
OSHA. Oh yeah. So we have a workforce that actually really, really appreciates and values safety, right? So they've been trained, like to go up on a building in New York, you need a 16-hour card, you need a 32-hour card. Those represent, courses that you're taking about the safety of the industry. So before you can even get up on the building, right, you're spending a week's worth of time at least, in understanding the safety parameters. And look, once you get up on the building, there's a lot more safety training that happens in between teams. So, while we're making the industry safer, there's different elements to this, right? These workforce members haven't necessarily been around a robot before, right? So we have a ton of safety features to make sure that at least while they're on the rooftop, which where they can be next to the robot, that they're going to be like protected at all times. And what's been really awesome and interesting, I hadn't really thought about it before we really got into it with Skyline, is just how conscious these workers are of safety. And when you think about it, right, you're putting yourself 1,000 feet in the air with nothing underneath you. Like, I can totally understand why safety regulation and safety observation and procedures are really important. Doesn't mean everyone follows every single letter of the law like perfectly at all times, right? We're humans. We can make a mistake. We can forget a piece of the process at the end of the day. But we've really enjoyed working with this workforce because even though it's a different type of safety training that we're giving them, they've been very receptive, open, and really wanting to learn because I think they also can understand, while there's a subset of people that might be like scared, right? We're coming for a job, although we're really just augmenting and increasing the productivity of the existing workforce that's there. Again, there's no new generation that's coming. So we need to sort of like reconfigure how we're cleaning the windows. And we'll always have a human being on site next to the crane that's located at the top of the skyscraper and monitoring the system. So, but we have a workforce that really appreciates safety, really loves to go through the training procedures, and really understand, how to take this, evolution, steps forward every single time we're out in the field.
Yeah. Well, and so, I mean, I realize time is flying, even just talking about labor and what we're doing. I think that you brought up something great, which is basically, there's still a human being watching the automation, right? And that's one of the things that I say too, is, there's still humans involved. It's just what they're doing in the job is different. It's more a supervisory versus actually physically doing the work. So explain to me what these systems look like and how they work. Because I'm assuming, I have my assumption, but I don't even want to get to the assumption. So kind of try to explain in words how your system works, what it looks like, and how you get somebody going from people to automation and how long it takes for that changeover. So like, I'm calling from Illinois. So let's say it's Willis Tower. Used to be Sears Tower for people that don't live in Illinois, how would you get that tower to go to Skyline?
Good questions. So here, I'll start with the last question and work my way back. So Willis Tower is actually really interesting because 30 years ago, they had one of the only automated window cleaning systems out there. They bought it from a manufacturer who deployed one system ever, and that was at Willis Tower. And it's a really, interesting notion that what we're doing today has always been an idea, right? People always seen this as a place where automation can make sense. But no one's ever been able to, raise sufficient funding, do the requisite R&D work that's necessary, and really push this, because it is not an inexpensive hobby, in developing this type of technology. While there are some, lower cost robotics products out there, with what we do, the safety, the communications element, water management, obviously the security of the system, the path planning for the robots, it requires, capital dollars to be able to invest, not just into like the equipment costs themselves, but into people who can, program and code these things, in the way that they need to code and understand their variable environment. And this is one thing that really separates our team, is our ability to handle this outdoor multivariable environment with a traditional looking robotic arm. So when you asked me to describe the system, essentially you can think of it as like two main components. There's a 6-axis robotic arm, which for those of the listeners that don't know, a 6-axis robotic arm is essentially called that because it has all the same joints that a human arm does. So it can be manipulated in basically any direction that a human arm, can as part of the, cleaning process in our case, or in other cases, a car manufacturing process, for example. That robotic arm sits on top of a waterproof table. Inside of that table, bunch of different, computers, sensors, communication systems. But basically what the robotic arm is placed on is like a steady working environment in this outdoor multivariable environment. So, the robotic arm has a tool attached to it. That tool is a brush. In our case, the brush is actually very much akin to window cleaning brushes from like 60 years ago, 70 years ago, when they used to use these like horsehair brushes. While our design is very reminiscent of that, we certainly don't use horsehair, as part of our brushes. And the vision for the system is immediately next to the robotic arm on top of the table, and we use a LiDAR camera. So LiDAR has become popularized by electronic vehicle manufacturers to map the environments around vehicles, sort of a really prevalent and validated, use case, or mostly validated use case. We're not quite at autonomous driving, everywhere yet, but moving in that, direction. We use LiDAR to map each and every window. And basically that map, is then sent to the computer underneath the robotic arm that plans the cleaning path for the robotic arm itself. And essentially the vision for the system gives it a border of each and every window. And then the robotic arm is painting between the lines, essentially. But being able to localize, and use what's called SLAM, or simultaneous localization and mapping, on highly reflective and in many cases, obviously glass is a transparent surface, is another big sort of technological hurdle that Skyline early on, had to overcome. And so our mapping's getting better and better. And we're really excited about that because we think that there's a lot of really interesting data that can be layered on top of that mapping capability. And, one day we'll certainly get there, but I won't talk about owning the facade as a whole right now. And we'll continue with window cleaning. All right. So Willis Tower had a unit. In order for us to want to go to a market, we want to find a local window cleaning company from their market. We don't want to be in the sales business, like in a sense where we don't want to have to go to every single building on the planet and try to pitch, what we're doing. There's a lot of buildings. It would take a lot of salespeople to get to every single building on the planet. The other piece of the puzzle is we don't want to be in the human labor business. So we don't want to have the operators be Skyline staff. We want to use the existing workforce and not try to not attempt to put them out of business in any way, but rather try to enhance and provide longevity, for their operations. So if we as Skyline, have a local partner in Chicago, which we do, that partner, essentially has a bunch of pre-existing relationships, that may exist. But Willis Tower in specific is owned by Blackstone. And so in that case, we would want to come in and share with a developer of that caliber, or a real estate owner, of that caliber, right? This is not someone that owns, 5 buildings, 10 buildings, or even 100 buildings, right? They own about 1,000 buildings, maybe 1,500 buildings, out there, right? So you happen to hit on a building where you have to take a really high sense of like care into a presentation like that, not just because of like what's represented in that one iconic building for Chicago, but really because who owns the building and what that owner, sort of can represent as well. So, we are a technology company, but technology companies often have a hard time, really trying to figure out how to come to market. And they forget the human element of trying to explain why technology is better and building relationships. These are things that are like so untechnological that they don't fit into an Excel spreadsheet, right? Tech companies love we love our Excel spreadsheets. We love our dashboards. But the value that you can create in this industry, which is a really old school industry at the end of the day, a lot of it still is very human centric. So you have to both be able to be that technology, like guru, trusted source, be able to explain everything that's happening, but you've also got to be able to be there and, wish them happy birthday, tell them that you love, that you're there to support their kids if they want to learn about entrepreneurship. Be willing to go to meals, support charities that people are interested in. You just got to be around, because these regional markets do operate differently. In New York and Chicago, aren't the same markets from this viewpoint. But at the end of the day, the people that have been in building services are old school. I mean, I've been told by a building manager, he won't check email. He will only meet if I call his phone and show up in person. And look, we go and do it. It's not my place to tell someone how they need to do business. I've got to be willing to make it happen, at the end of the day. So there is this very much, the exciting technological side of what we do. And that's the foundation for everything else. If I don't have great, technology behind me, none of my words will ever hit home. We'll never get up on buildings, everything like that. But with a really strong technological backing, you got to be willing to do sort of the human side of things and really understand how the industry works. It doesn't work on a spreadsheet. It doesn't work just on emails. These are people that build relationships, have worked with their service provider a decade, 2 decades, 3 decades. It's really hard to peel away, and take ownership of these relationships. And so that's why we feel that partnering with the existing service providers is an additional, benefit to what we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's very smart. I mean, that's, honestly, it's kind of what I thought I was going to do, but it's different in the landscaping world, because there's so many different people, and you can't guarantee every landscape professional is actually a professional and not just a landscaper, right? But with you guys, it's probably a little bit different situation with the industry you're in. So, a couple things you talked about what it is and how it works is, so you brought up the brush, but in my mind, I'm not a window cleaner though, you can brush the window, but don't you have to squeegee it then too? So how do you get the water on the brush? How do you get what you brushed off? Is it with a separate robotic arm? How does that work?
Great question. So this actually was not an innovation from Skyline Robotics, but in some global markets, Madrid, Spain, Sydney, Australia, some window cleaners will use what's called reverse osmosis. So reverse osmosis is a type of water purification or deionization, essentially, of the water. Typically, it comes as an upcharge in those markets because it's a separate piece of equipment that needs to be brought on site. But essentially, we have 2 tools today, because they put soap, on this very lightweight brush, and then they just need to squeegee everything off the window. They need to use soap and squeegee everything off because the water that they're using has some dirty remnants in the water. When you take, tap water, or certainly the water supplies that we'll find on a rooftop of a building, sometimes there's some contaminants in there, but that's what window cleaners use. And if you just put that water on a window as is, basically you're going to dry a bunch of streaks, and you're going to see a lot of dust particles, dry on the windows when they're dry. What reverse osmosis allows is essentially the mitigation of needing 2 tools. So by deionizing and purifying the water, we're removing all of those dirty particles and contaminants from the water. The water supply is fed from the rooftop down to wherever the elevation of the basket is. We're managing water pressure through algorithmic solenoids. So essentially, if you or I dove 500 meters into the ocean, that would be the water pressure that would build down to our robot, essentially, if you had 500 meters of straight water coming down a skyscraper. But if you allow variable amounts of air and water into the water line, you're not allowing that water pressure to build in the same way. So essentially, there's a water control system on the top of the rooftop as well as down by the rooftop. And that management of the water pressurization, leveraging the reverse osmosis, allows us to clean at really high heights while not needing 2 separate tools.
So it always amazes me when I do shows about the spot that was just going to be impress the shit out of me. And that whole controlling the water pressure part, you might, and here's the thing, people, robotic arms moving around. But these are the things that the best people in the world have to think about that nobody thinks about. So I can tell you, I would have never thought about that. I'd be like, yeah, throw the hose over the side. The thing would be freaking water jetting holes in the glass probably that have so much pressure, So that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, the robotics gets the show, but the communication system, the water management system, having long distance communications in highly metallic environments with lots of reflective surfaces in densely urban areas, and having reliability, for that communication, commanding of the robot, and obviously, the passing of the data back to the rooftop. It's something, just like you said, like when I joined the company, I didn't understand some of the complexities maybe on the technological side as well as I certainly do today. But, the team that we have in place, we got 27 amazing employees that sit just north of Tel Aviv in Israel. These men and women bust their butt to figure out anything that needs to be figured out. I'm so appreciative of, being a member of the team and getting to lead them into battle, because they're there for me every time that we need them to step up. And, they put me on the spot a few times as well. And I certainly got to step up and do some heavy lifting at points, but it's incredibly motivational, inspirational. And just again, to your point, there's a lot behind this that isn't going to get captured on a video. So even if you did show a video of our product, it wouldn't do it justice, candidly, from the technological side of the organization.
Yeah. Well, so now let's start breaking into like keeping them running. Okay. So this is the part that obviously I feel like our teams become really good at in our space. So, what's your oldest unit? Like, how long you guys been doing this? What's your oldest setup?
Yeah. So, we don't run the oldest setup of a complete system that we have at this point. Our customer in New York has newer versions. And in Israel,
let's say this generation, the oldest of this generation.
Yeah. So we delivered some stuff to a customer, beginning of 22. So that's just like a year old. That's probably the oldest version of our system that's quote unquote out in the market. At this point in time, we maintain some older versions of the systems because I think one day we should have like a museum in our office about all the generations, of Osmo that there ever were. But yeah, so we don't have an incredibly, old set of systems that's out in the market and it's tough to maintain. We do, have a lot of, work that we want to get done on the system though. So thinking ahead, we can foresee, obviously the need to maintain, various generations and how we might be able to sort of navigate that. One of our thoughts though, in terms of what do we do with the old equipment, I think that a traditional approach, right, would be to say after it comes off lease, we're going to scrap it and get what we can, for it. The really interesting thing about what we do and the window cleaning industry as a whole is that, I'm sure this applies elsewhere, but labor markets, labor wage scales are very different in different markets. So we do think that maybe some of the old equipment, once we've sort of made our money and margin on it, we can do like a light refurbishment maybe to it and see if we can open up a low wage scale market as well. Because there's some markets out there we and no one else can compete with $1 a day labor, but they happen to be really interesting markets on a global scale. So when we think about the utility or longevity, of a system that we want to give a second life to, we get potentially that as a way, those older systems coming off the initial lease, as a way potentially to open up those lower wage scale markets and, continue to run them as long as we can.
Yeah. I guess then to kind of redirect the question, I mean, how much like preventative maintenance work has to get done on these, like how many hours, like, how many windows can it wash before, you need to go through the arm? Because like I look at it and say, okay, this thing's swinging there. you're doing all this stuff, and the last thing you want to happen is like a sticking bearing or joint, then it puts the arm through the window, right? So like, how do you guys always test those parameters and make sure, right? Is that done automatically? I don't know.
Yeah, for sure. So there's some automated testing each time the system turns on. There's a daily checklist. The system will run about 15 minutes of checks on itself each day before we actually start the operation. For our customers, we recommend quarterly maintenance checks. A little bit more in depth than obviously the system checks that are running in an automated fashion. If something is caught in the automated checks, essentially our back end gets that data with the logs and everything like that right to our R&D team. So even before a customer picks up the phone, they're already looking in to what the issue might be. And that back end infrastructure has really helped us to be able to handle more systems being out there, the production of more systems, and the efficiency in being able to solve any problems that exist. But we've gone with quarterly maintenance checks, a little more in depth. We've been able to do these on the rooftops. So like if a system is on the rooftop already and it's not sitting in a warehouse, we don't need to take it back to a warehouse, for any reason. And we're we're close to maybe officially having a partner that'll cover all of our U.S. service operations. As we expand and think more globally, I'm sure that we'll try to replicate that if what we're going to do here with this potential partner is successful. So if we feel that they're able to handle it and we have everything in place that allows them to be successful, I think it's something that we'll replicate. Because at the end of the day, it's a revenue line that maybe we'll miss at some point, right? That type of service revenue. But the world's so much bigger than that line item. It's something at the end of the day, we want to be really focused on what makes us special and different. And potentially that isn't an area that makes Skyline Robotics special and different.
Well, you would think we scripted this before the show, but I mean, you're literally talking to the yin and yang of the industry here, because what you're basically saying is what you guys are going to stay focused on is, and if I heard this right, your software, your hardware, the things that actually do the window washing, but you don't want to be focused on the service side. And honestly, AOS, my company, we're focused on service and leasing and service agreements and all that other stuff. So it's actually ironic. I had somebody tell me the other day, why don't you just make one of these on your own? And I said, because then I wouldn't be clean. And he looked at me funny and I said, listen, I right now, I'm proving out to multiple manufacturers, I can purchase their equipment, put it out in service, and then maintain it. The minute I make something of my own, I'm now their competition. And you just said it, and you said it perfectly. And I just want to say this because I sometimes think in our industry, Ross, people get like a little bit of like, honestly, sometimes I think all startup people have a little bit of ADHD, whether they admit it or don't admit it or want to admit it around, because we're rapid fire, we're always doing stuff. So the problem is because of that, they want to have everything. I want everything. I want to make the robot, and I want to install the robot, and I want to do it. And I'm going to start a window cleaning business now. But it's hard to raise capital doing that. And it's also hard to, your people don't know what they're doing. So it's like if you stay hyper focused, your people know their purpose, right? So your people know their purpose,
100%. And I wish it was quite that simple, but I this is the way I live and breathe and, speak to the team, right? Yeah, we have a lot to do with the things that we need to be great at the end of the day. It doesn't mean that we're going to be great at everything possible on this planet. No one is. We're not even going to be perfect ourselves, but we come to work with an open mind, a positive attitude, and a willingness to get better. We make sure that goal setting is appropriate. We make sure that our ambition is in the right place. And we make sure that we're able to generate high drive and passion from the team that's working on this. And look, it's an incredible team. We're doing something that, candidly, no one else has ever done. Certainly our implementation is quite unique from everything that's ever tried to come to market. And, being different can be good and bad, but doing it, the right way with a really amazing team, really smart people, it's not just an exciting business opportunity. I think it's incredibly rewarding, for everyone that gets to participate in it as well.
Yeah, fantastically said. And that is what's nice about being a startup is the entire team feels rewarded, because it doesn't make a difference who you are on the team. When you tell other people what you're doing, then they've never heard of it before, you're like instantly a rock star. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, and that's what I find. I mean, I've always said this, like two of my stepsons, Ross, work in the company with me. My daughter, almost my whole family's in the company, actually, to be honest with you. And when they used to just, and it's great. I mean, I tell people it's like every day is a family party for me, But when they first started working with me in my other company, they would just tell people, yeah, I cut grass, And now they're like, yeah, I'm a robotic technician and we're growing. And just to even hear how excited they are, right? Because everybody kind of gets involved in the growth and the cool factor of tech, But even like looking at what you guys are doing, and you said, okay, well, you don't have future generations of window washers coming in. It will probably be easier for those companies that do window washing to be able to go to a job fair and say, hey, we're hiring, this is the industry. They probably still need that same OSHA certification and stuff like that, but you also need to have an understanding of technology and robotics and be able to run this. There'll be so many people that have had a cell phone or a tablet or an iPad in their hands since they've been in school, that'll be like, yeah, I can do that all day. So, that's what we tell people, or I tell people, and I'm sure you also see it, Ross, is that the new generation of worker isn't, in my opinion, not mentally lazy. They just want to do jobs that they don't have to be as physical at. And what you're doing is more mental, less physical, right?
100%. And I think that what you're saying is like really hitting the nail on the head. I think that there's, what we hope is that we can create a lot of new jobs, candidly, at the end of the day. Again, I think it's one thing to look at the industry like as is, but what does the industry without technology look like in 7 years from now? Has it totally fallen apart? Is there a way to clean all the windows? Or have we just started charging everyone so much more that's how we source the labor? So for partners that are coming, into Skyline now and helping us sort of like lead this, evolution, they're betting not just on our technology, right? But they're searching for ways to create longevity in their own businesses. They know it's necessary. It's nice to say that you're innovative, right? But there's different layers and motivation for why people pursue different business initiatives or certainly personal initiatives. And in this case, it is multi-layered, but a layer of it is just long-term survival, of the business, right? That they know they've had a good business. Doesn't mean it's the biggest business on the planet, but it's a pretty good business in these metropolitan and urban areas, at the end of the day. And they see no reason why that should end, and we certainly don't either. So, again, we think we can do it differently, more efficiently, layer on the transparency, and bring a lot of safety, to this outdoor multivariable environment, and put the pieces together in a way that actually, again, may not look the most appealing in an Excel spreadsheet. They look damn good, don't get me wrong, but do it in a way that can actually get market penetration, that can actually get adoption, and that can actually allow focus.
So if I was a window cleaning company and this was a sales Zoom call and not a podcast, right? How would I get started with your product? Like if I said, yep, I want one of those right now, am I buying it? You kind of alluded earlier, you're leasing it, and then how does that work for, how do you guys work that?
Yeah. So again, markets can be different, right? New York labor scale is not Chicago labor scale, it's not San Francisco labor scale. Also, there's different amounts of buildings. in each market, right? New York has the most, Chicago has the second most, San Francisco, I think, has the sixth most skyscrapers in the US. So when we're putting together a deal, we want to be exclusive with the leaders of their regions. Because again, we want to make sure that we're focused on what we're trying to do, and they're focused on running their business. So we want them exclusive with us and us exclusive with them. If we think that there's like a match, in terms of like mindset, right? We'll look through their sort of like existing customers, identify for them if, like, say, there can be some really complex geometry on buildings, right? Osmo, we test on a lot of things, but we don't say that we handle complex geometry, to our customers today. So eventually we'll get down to say, okay, 75% of your customers are applicable. We want to scale this up in terms of the number of units that you're going to take over the first few years, right? The first year, it's going to be, more training, getting you up to speed, getting your team really comfortable with the technology. Year two is like when it sort of like pops, and you're going to take like a bunch of units with your trained employees and certified, staff, as it relates to the operation. And then we're like layering on year 3, year 4, year 5, as everyone's more comfortable. As simple, as we want to make our product at the end of the day, it's still new. And being new always creates some amount of friction. And so we don't have the presumption that any new customer will go from 0 to 10 units in 1 year, right? We think it's appropriate to actually scale things up, in the first year, right? Take a unit, take 2 units, like in that first year, get comfortable running. Okay, then we're going to jump, 5, 6 units per year, sort of from there. So we look at these sort of multi-year deals. We want to pick our partners selectively. If we think there's like a meeting of the minds from the standpoint of what our technology provides versus a window cleaning company's market position and appetite for growth, or potentially, candidly, a sale of the company. But if there's again, a meeting of the minds there, and everyone feels good about what we're doing, we'll be aggressive in pursuing that. But inbound interest isn't our problem at the moment. We get about 1.5 inbound inquiries per day in calendar year 2023, up from 1.2 per day in 22, up from 0.8 per day in calendar 21. People are starting to definitely pay more attention to what we're doing. And our problem right now is like, we can't be everywhere at once. So we are prioritizing, we are picking our battles, we are understanding the risks, that we're not going forward with certain markets today. But we're really excited for what's happening, whether it's the existing environment, whether it's new construction projects. You're going to see Skyline in a lot of fun places over time.
Yeah, that's awesome. So we do like, I just wonder, because you brought up different costs in different markets. So do you guys are you trying to figure out, like, let's say the traditional cost per, so I'm not in window washing, but I assume there's got to be a breakdown on like the cost per square foot of window washed with a human versus the cost per square foot of window washed with your product, right? And then I would assume your product, like the products I'm using, it's almost like you could almost say you're an inflation buster. So even if, and I don't know the numbers for everybody listening, I'm just going down this road with Ross because there's so many parallels in automation, no matter what market you're in. But, I always tell professionals I'm working with, like, automation is an inflation buster. So if you can make it fit in the number today, it's going to fit 3 years from now, right? Is that kind of the way your systems are looking also when you're talking to your people, or your partners, because you said you're partnering with strategic people?
So again, I think that there's not necessarily just a way to fit into the number that exists today, right? If you're a window cleaning company, it's typically 85 to 90% of your cost structure is the human labor cost, for any particular operation. And that includes 3 bodies. So basically our math is like, well, we still need 1 body on site. We're going to understand the labor costs in your market. We're going to understand if we need to adjust our pricing scheme based on your market, because what's been really interesting to me, and this is another element about why technology companies shouldn't just live in Excel, candidly, at the end of the day, is that, we came in and we've presented, I don't know, 10 or 12 different like potential business models to our first customer in New York before we actually got to a deal. Everything from utilization, rev shares on square feet, anything that you could think of, all the way from CapEx all the way through that like rev share. And candidly, they just wanted something simple. They wanted to think of it like an employee, right? Well, I know each month I'm going to pay this employee this much money. Okay, I just want to know this month I'm going to pay this robot employee essentially like this much money. This is an old school industry. Complexity can provide sizzle on the business model. Don't get me wrong, but at the end of the day, whether it's New York, Chicago, some European markets where we progress conversations, people just want something simple. They want to think of it, like they're paying an employee. Does that mean that we might be leaving a few points on the table? Does that mean they might, at the end of the day, be leaving a few points on the table? Depends on how much utilization they're getting. But our concern, while we want all units out there all the time, no matter what, we're collecting revenue, whether the unit's in use or not. So it just depends on the utilization that they want to get out of the technology, certainly as well. But again, we went through a variety of business model exercises before signing the deal with our first customer, and the net result was just like, give me something simple. I don't want to have to overthink this. Let's pick the price. Show me it worked. From math standpoint, I'll pass it to my finance people. They'll tell me it works. Also, and let's get going.
Yeah. I suppose, and it's like I said, it's not my industry, so it's difficult. But I've talked to people like that too, where they're like, "Well, I pay my person this, whatever." But I always am just amazed, and I'm just wondering how you guys overcome this, because a lot of business owners, and maybe this doesn't happen in the people you're working with, but they always look at what they paid the employee. So if they, I'm assuming window washers, maybe that's $100,000 a year employee. So then they're like, well, I only want to pay the robot $100,000 a year. But my problem with that is that's they're paying their employee so much more than they're paying FICA on that employee. They're paying workman's comp on that employee. So then if I was you guys, if I was working with Skyline, I'd be saying, okay, well, hold on a second. We need to know what all those costs are, what they're paying that person, and the actual profit margin they want to make on that person. Because what I'd be trying to ask right now is to say, if you want to make a 30% margin on that person, right? What margin could you make with a robot? Because it's always there. It's reliable. It doesn't have family emergencies. So then you can start to sell like more schedule, more work. So I don't know. I mean, to me, I think that's I just always like to get this out there for people, so that the people selling the automation are making sure that they don't get duped by the end user because they don't want to go deep enough into their numbers. You know what I'm saying?
100%. And also for people that we speak with, Joe, it's it's always interesting because yes, we want to partner specifically with the leader in that market, and that might lead to more contracts for them. And we've already started to see that happen, in the market, because people want to get access, to the technology. But there's always the potential sort of scare, right? Like my revenue number might fall, right? Because I'm going to be paying less for my employees because they're robots. But what's happening on the bottom line, right? Because people always like to talk about top line, especially in these like traditional, industries, right? Yes. Right. So top line could go down, but if your EBITDA or your net margin at the end of the day is going up, you shouldn't have a problem with that. Now, it might be less exciting to tell your friends on the golf course, about what your sort of like revenue numbers are at the end of the day, right? But if more money's coming into your pocket, when it's all said and done, why should top line matter?
Right. No, absolutely. Well, and I'm glad you said, because we're on the same page with that. I just, like I said, there's a lot of people that listen to the show that are starting businesses and stuff, and I just always like to try to get people to think outside the box and think exactly the way you just said it, Ross. It's like if you can make more money with automation, don't don't be so caught up in the top line or how many employees. I mean, even myself, I've run into this where it's like, in snow season, I need 200 people. In landscape season, I only need 100, but I always tell people I employ 200 people. So I fall into the trap also. I always say, this is how many people I employ at the craziest time of my year, But at the flip side, I should be very happy that the 100 people I employ make a lot of money just full time. You know what I mean? So that's all. So we've been talking for a while. I always like to leave a little bit of time at the end for two things. First, to talk about you personally and a little bit of your family life. But before we get to that, you did allude a little bit to the fact that you guys have more than window cleaning, right? In mind. So do you want to hit on some of the things you guys think you're doing with Skyline?
Yeah, so I think that there's like a few layers, to what's called the facade access industry overall. Window cleaning is like a dominant part of that. Every building gets their windows cleaned. But when we look at the other services that happen on the facade, there's things like inspection services, there's glazing services, things like window replacement, light masonry work, certainly repair work that happens. We don't envision Osmo, which is what we call our product, handling all of those things. But within that sort of like layering of opportunities, we're already working towards sort of like what the second service, will be. And especially as like ESG regulations and carbon emission regulations are coming in, sometimes in a very punitive fashion. They'll actually like fine buildings for not complying with certain regulations. All of a sudden, how your facade is maintained, and analyzed needs to be thought of very differently, because a bunch of loose seals on your windows aren't going to structurally make your window fall out, but it could allow for air and water infiltration to be more prevalent on a given facade. So, if we can identify all the sort of like weaknesses of the facade and produce what we're calling as a facade health profile, we think that there's going to be a ton of like actionable data for things like preventative maintenance, where people can ensure, that air and water infiltration is not happening. There's some data out there, or I've seen some statistics cited that, essentially bad seals can lead to about a 43% increase of an HVAC system usage, right? So if you have air and water, potentially coming in through those seals, that HVAC system is going to be overworked, or maybe overworked is the wrong term, because those are like really heavy industrial systems that are meant to be overworked, but worked more than is necessary. And if we can, help, present sort of the mapping of the facade back with a lot of interesting data and insights to it, it's somewhere between that, inspection service, which has a very legal meaning. So we call ours a facade health profile, at the end of the day. But there's going to be a lot of really interesting, data that we're going to be able to pull out, not just share with the service provider, the asset owner, in terms of the developer of the building, but the property manager and potentially the regulators, who are monitoring this as well. So we do see a lot of outlets, for this data that we might be, that we're collecting, and certainly enhancing what we're collecting and how we're collecting it. But the beauty of what we do is that whether it's LiDAR or, hyperspectral or geothermal cameras, we don't need sunlight. So we've done some testing within our R&D market in Israel, cleaning some windows at night. We think that commercial window cleaning should happen during the nighttime. Residential cleaning should happen during the daytime. And let's not interfere with anyone. Make sure we give a really good, customer experience at the end of the day. And again, our goal with Osmo, we say it's to own the facade. And so there's more than just window cleaning that happens on the facade. We're just scratching the surface of where we're headed as a company. And we should have a lot of really exciting announcements through the back half of calendar year 2023.
Well, yeah, I mean, I even think about cleaning the window at night or whatever, and the way you're seeing, I would think you guys would be able to even make reports to show where you're getting these CO leakages, right? You'll be able to see warmth coming out of a window in places it shouldn't, cool air coming out of a window in places it shouldn't. I feel like you should be able to see this better at night because you don't have the sun, the heat of the sun distorting a window and everything. So, right. I mean, so this is, but see, these are the types of things where like everybody talks about, what do they say? Information's the new oil, but with all this information, that you bring in, and you're talking about the regulatory stuff, is I'm sure there's regulations that just say, yeah, every 10 years, and I'm just coming up with the number, I don't know what it is, but every 10 years you got to reglaze a window. And now these companies are like, well, 10 years we got to reglaze. But maybe now with your data, you can show, well, you only have to reglaze south-facing windows because that's what gets beat by the sun. But the north-facing stuff goes 20 years. The amount of value that presents for these property owners is massive, right, Ross? I mean, it's invaluable.
Oh yeah, 100%. And again, we see a lot of outlets and a lot of value creation, certainly that we can provide with these data sets. Again, we're humble and hungry though. No matter what new technology, we're going to have to prove it to every single developer out there on the planet, if we need to. But we're just really excited for how the industry is embracing us. We've taken investment in, from leading developers in multiple markets, taken investment in from strategic partners, high profile people throughout the industry. People see the value in what we're doing, and we're really excited to just keep working our butts off to bring this thing to the place it needs to be brought.
Yeah, great, Ross. I'm very impressed with you and what you guys are doing. So, tell me about your family before we go. I mean, outside of work, what's the Ross when he's not focused on startups, So
great question. So first of all, I have an awesome wife. We got married at the Halloween or the night before Halloween in 2021. We're expecting our first baby July 4th is the due date. So wow, we're getting prepared. For whatever that's going to entail. Right now, I have a ton of boxes in my apartment, and I got to start figuring out like what to do with this stuff. Definitely a disadvantage of New York City, from this standpoint is utilize, the general amount of space that you have and how well you have to utilize, that overall. Outside of my wife, I spend a lot of time with the kids that I grew up with. Still my closest friends in the world are people that I knew in middle school. I transferred to a school in 7th grade and have been friends with the same people for 25 years since. Got a group of like 14 of us that are super close. But I have friend groups from, all different walks of life. I love being with people, but I don't get to do it as much as I want because I work too much. So whether it's 10 o'clock or midnight or whatever it might be, there's been many times that, want to be out with friends, having drinks and having a good time, but got to get something done, for work. And I think at the end of the day, it's a tough balance to find at points. But working in startups, you get pushed in different ways. You get faced with new challenges. You have new problems to solve constantly. And to me, it's a lot of fun. So, while it is work, who else gets to do this? It's like pretty unique, the type of stuff that like I get to work on, whether it's been here at Skyline, at the digital asset company, working on digital ownership before the term NFT had ever been created, doing telehealth. Well, telehealth hadn't quite become ubiquitous at that point, but we thought we had our own like spin on it. I feel like I've been really fortunate with the people I've gotten to work with, the companies that I've been a part of. And, I think I've done my best to provide as much value back to, each layer of those companies and really focused on trying to have as fulfilling as a life as possible. My wife's awesome. Really excited. We're gonna have our first baby boy. See friends when I can. And play golf. Way too infrequently. But love being out on the golf course. So she went to college with a good friend of mine from law school. So he made the introduction. So I met her. We've been together a little over 8 years. So it took a while for me to pop the question, and get married. And then COVID happened, and that sort of shifted our schedule on the wedding a little bit. But I still hear in my ear telling me it took too long. Every single day. So nonetheless,
good things come to those that wait, is the saying. You gotta tell her that next time.
Patience is a virtue.
Exactly. So how about younger, family, like any brothers and sisters, mom and dad, like upbringing?
So I have an older brother, 7 years older than me. Sort of more followed my father's footsteps going into the world of finance. I was always a little bit different. My mom passed away, unfortunately, about 12 years ago. And so no problem. It's, part of life, and gives me a lot of great perspective, on things when dealing with situations, and understanding how grave or terrible a situation, really is. And it keeps me really level-headed. So I think it's definitely helped me, grow in different ways, having gone through that. But I have a big step family now. Love all them. There's my dad's partner has 4 kids, and they have 12 kids of their own. So it's a big group when everyone's together. I'm not saying it happens often, but appreciate being with everyone when we can make it happen. A few of them are local here in New York City, so I do get to see them pretty frequently. Outside of that, love, just love being with my friends, spending time with my wife and soon to be son. So again, I'm ready not to sleep.
I was going to ask if you knew the sex of the baby, so now we know son. And did you do anything with sports or anything in school? Any extracurricular activities or?
So I grew up playing basically anything that I could: soccer, baseball, basketball. Play golf, skiing. Still love all these things. Just don't get to do them as much. In my junior year at high school, for class 3A, we won our state championship in baseball. We had one kid that went and pitched at Michigan. So he was pretty good at baseball. A few other guys in our league. One guy made it to the major leagues, a guy named Pedro Alvarez, played for the Pittsburgh Pirates, for a few years ago. So we didn't have like a bad team, but we're, small prep schools at the end of the day. We didn't have like hundreds of kids, in each grade. And that's sort of the New York City private schools, are all sort of like that for the most part. Some of them do get up to maybe 100, 120, a class, but my graduating class was 52 kids. I wasn't ready to go to, major rah-rah college campus and go to a school that had like 40,000, students. So took a small step going to Babson, like 2,000 students, honed in on entrepreneurship. And then, thought I made a lot of good decisions along the way. And look, hindsight's 2020, and everything in the rearview mirror, I can stack up and be like, oh, like maybe this mistake was good, for me at the end of the day.
Entrepreneurship is. Entrepreneurs constantly learn, right? I mean, honestly, the best entrepreneurs, I tell people I'm learning every day. I'm leading people every day, but I'm learning. I always say it's a constant feedback loop. If you're making money, you're doing good. If it's going down a little bit, you're not doing good. If you're losing employees, okay, you've got a culture issue. You just have to be quick to adapt, right? That's what entrepreneurs do. So it sounds like you'd say rear view mirror, hindsight, but you always have to check your rearview mirror to keep moving forward, So now, do you have any mentors? I always like to get an opportunity for people to mention people that are like mentors or leaders to them.
There's too many to name, but I'll keep their names out of the conversation. I'm nothing without the community around me. I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of really interesting people, and just appreciative of everything that they've sort of been able to invest in me, not from a monetary standpoint, but just from an education, timing, perseverance at different points in life. And so it's been again, without the community around me, I wouldn't be half the person I am today. So the biggest piece of that, though, of course, is my wife. Just make sure I get that out there. And
I'm going to tell you, this woman better give you a big hug and a kiss. I don't think I've had a guest that brings up his wife so many times. I'm impressed that you must really love this woman. So the
she's okay.
So lastly, I mean, right now, if today, if this was the last company you ever worked with, and started up, what do you want to be remembered for? What's your legacy? What's the mark you're going to leave on this world?
I wear something around my neck that my mother carried with her to every doctor's appointment. It just says, never quit. So, my mother had pancreatic cancer, very terrible cancer, very high death rate, very low survivability, even after like 6 months, 12 months, things like that. She made it 31 months. And I wear something around my neck, that she carried with her to every doctor's appointment. That's what I bring to the table. I'm never going to stop. I'm never going to quit. I'm going to keep pushing myself. I'm going to push everyone around me. And, I think that you got to bring that level of desire, focus and execution to really have a hope of any chance of success, like with a startup at the end of the day. So I think it's just the mentality, the perseverance, the desire. Those are the things that I want to be remembered for at the end of the day.
So that was an amazing end to a show. I love the fact that you have something on you that your mom used to have, and you're using it in such a positive light. And I think you're an awesome human being. I'm happy to have gotten to talk to you for over an hour, and I wish you luck. And I actually hope I can meet you in person one day if you're ever in Illinois and looking at high rises. Give me a call. Maybe we'll go out to lunch one day and we can talk more. So
it would be awesome, Joe. Really appreciate you having me. You built an awesome platform here at Automating Success. Keep it going. We'll keep listening and keep bringing interesting people on.
Awesome. Thanks, Ross.